One of the strongest forces at play in the education system is that of competition. We seek to be the best in our classrooms, in our year groups, in our schools, in our districts, in our states. And in some ways, competition can be really healthy. It can drive standards, it can inspire us to improvement, it can help us learn from one another. However, there is a really important difference when we're thinking about a Christian vision for education that needs to be about embracing interdependence and choosing collaboration over competition. When I make that choice, I say to you that your story matters to mine. It's we, not me. And our contemporary society is set up really differently to this. We're set to compete, aren't we? We're set to have league tables and judgments and ranking. But when you go back into the radical vision of the early church, their vision was for sharing of actual things. It wasn't a conceptual sharing or an ideological interdependence, but rather a real sharing of things, food, of property, of time, of resources. And we might think of our schools, what would a network like this, what would a true collaboration like this really look like and feel like to work between institutions in that way, so that we are not competing with each other, but we are interdependent with one another. When we think about the idea of flourishing is not something that we do on our own as individuals or as individual schools. We flourish together, not alone. When we think of the kinds of relationships that this might lead to, and this applies, in your school's senior team, in your governing boards, in your staff team, in your classrooms of students, and our relationships between organizations, we might think of the famous moment in John's Gospel where Jesus says, "Abide in me, abide in me." It's a really interesting word in the Greek, meno, and it literally means to remain, to endure, to last. And there are a few different aspects of that word that are really helpful when we're thinking about our interdependence. The first is, if our relationships are to endure, to last, and to remain, that means our interdependence is not contingent on our circumstances, on whether things are going well for you but less well for me. They're relationships that endure through the most difficult times and through the most joyous celebratory times. They endure, they last. They're relationships that are built on trust. We can't know everything about one another. We can't know everything that's going on. We need to trust. And I need to be in a relationship with you that trusts you implicitly, not conditionally, implicitly, and vice versa. And when we begin to trust, we begin to empower one another in our relationships. That's really true in our staff teams. The ability to trust our leaders and our teachers will pay great dividends in the quality of teaching in the classroom. Our relationships need to be inclusive, not conditional on who we are, what gender we are, what skin color we have, but actually saying, you belong with me and I belong with you. We're interdependent. And lastly, this call is to serve one another. This idea that Jesus portrays so beautifully and provocatively of washing his disciples' feet. The relationships that he seems to have in mind are not power relationships of domination and of imposition, but rather of service and selflessness. Ultimately, what interdependence means is that your success matters to me as much as my own. And wouldn't it be an incredible thing to work in a school system where that were true? What might happen to the flourishing of the children and the adults in the schools which we lead if we were to, in fact, put competition to one side and embrace interdependence together?